Welcome to this 1-hour English lesson. In this lesson, we're going to review advanced grammar topics so you can learn and correct some of the most common grammar mistakes that advanced students make. Now, because this is a long lesson, I've divided it into individual sections where you'll first review a grammar concept, and then you'll complete a quiz to make sure you understand that concept. Welcome back to JForrest English Training. Of course, I'm Jennifer, and this is your place to become a fluent, confident English speaker. Let's get started. First, let's talk about the difference between been and being. Both of these are simply different forms of the verb to be. So been is the past participle, and being is the present participle. Now, when you use one or the other simply depends on the verb tense that the sentence requires. And how do you know which verb tense the sentence requires? Well, you need to look at your time reference and understand where you are on a timeline, and if you're talking about the past, the present, or the future, and how those actions interact with one another, okay? So we use been in the present perfect verb tense. For example, how have you been? The question, how have you been? This is in the present perfect. And then your answer could also be in the present perfect. I've been busy. I have, as a contraction, I've been busy. So your key here to know when to use been or being is that been is used with the auxiliary verb have. But remember that have can be conjugated as has with he or she. So it would be she has been busy. I have been busy. So when you see the verb have or has, you know your sentence needs been, and that's the present perfect verb tense. Now, another time we use been is in the past perfect. So, for example, I had been there. I had been there. Here, your key is that been is used with had. So had is just the past form of the verb have. So again, you can just memorize when you see have, even if it's in a different conjugation or in the past, you need been. Being, on the other hand, is used with completely different verb tenses. Being is a present participle, so it's used in the continuous form. It's the verb in ing. In that sense, it's used in the present continuous. I could say, she's being difficult. She's being difficult. So here, your key is that being is used with the auxiliary verb to be. She is a form of the verb to be. It would be you are being difficult. Are is an auxiliary of the verb to be. So when you have the verb to be, you know you need being. We also use being in the past continuous. I could say she was being difficult, or they were being difficult. So again, we're using the auxiliary verb to be, but it's just conjugated in the past as was or were. So your clue for being is when it's used with the verb to be in a present form conjugated with the subject, or in the past form, which is either was or were. Now, being can also be used as a gerund verb. So that's the verb in ing, but is actually being used as the subject of a sentence. So, simply put, I can start my sentence with a gerund verb. And this is to make a general statement that applies to a general situation. So I could say, being difficult is not a good personality trait. Okay, it's just a general statement that applies most of the time. Being difficult is not a good personality trait. So notice my sentence starts with the verb being because that's the gerund verb. So that's a more advanced way to use the verb being. So that's to summarize when you're going to use been or being. Remember that they're just different forms of the verb to be, and when you use them depends on the verb tense that the sentence requires, and the sentence requires a specific verb tense depending on the time reference and if you're in the past, present, or future. So now this is a lot of information. The best way to truly understand this information is to practice it. So you have a lot of work to do. I want you to leave 5 sentences in the comments. 1 with the present perfect, past perfect, present continuous, past continuous, and bonus points if you can get a gerund statement. Remember, all of these are using been or being. So get to work. You're going to have to review this lesson again because there's a lot of information in here. So just take it slow. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the difference between been to and been in. So here are 2 example sentences. I've been to Paris 5 times. I've been in Paris for 5 weeks. What's the difference between these sentences? Well, let's talk about the first one. I've been to Paris 5 times. Notice that this sentence is in the present perfect. The structure of the present perfect is subject, have or has conjugated with the subject, the participle form of the verb. The verb here is the verb to be. So the past participle of the verb to be is been. We use been with all the subjects. And then the rest of your sentence. I've been to Paris 5 times. So why is this sentence in the present perfect? Well, it's because we use the present perfect for life experience. And we use it for life experience because our life is an ongoing timeline. And because of that, we're talking about actions that started in the past, such as traveling to Paris, but it's an unfinished timeline. So I can continue doing this action in the future. So I've been to Paris 5 times until now, and it's possible for me to go to Paris again. So maybe next year I'll say I've been to Paris 6 times. Because of that, the sentence is in the present perfect. When we use the present perfect with the verb to be, to as our preposition and a location, such as I've been to Paris, Paris is the location, 5 times. So we do this to talk about places we've traveled or places we haven't traveled, because things we haven't done is also part of our life experience. So we can put things we haven't done in the present perfect as well. So for example, I could say I've been to Thailand once, but I haven't been to Myanmar. Now let's compare this to I've been in Paris for 5 weeks. Now here, this sentence is also in the present perfect, but the reason why this sentence is in the present perfect is different. We're not talking about life experience per se, we're talking about an action that started in the past and continues until now. So notice I said I've been in Paris for 5 weeks. So what this means is 5 weeks ago, I arrived in Paris. That action started in the past. But here's the important thing. I'm in Paris right now. If I say I've been in Paris for 5 weeks, I'm currently in Paris. Okay? That's the very important thing to keep in mind. So when we use the present perfect with the verb to be, the preposition in, and then a location, this is used to talk about where we are now, and that action started in the past, but it continues until now. For example, I could say, my flight was canceled, so I've been in Texas for 3 days. So right now, I'm in Texas. Maybe I'm not supposed to be in Texas. I'm supposed to be in Paris, but my flight was canceled, so I'm stuck in Texas. The action started in the past 3 days ago, and it continues until now. I've been in Texas for 3 days. So now you know how to use the present perfect with the verb to be. I've been to, or I've been in, and a location. So it's your turn to practice. I want you to leave 2 examples, and why not try different subjects so you can practice conjugating your verb have or has with your subject. So put those in the comments below. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the difference between has gone and was gone. So first you need to see these in sentences to understand the full context. She's already gone home. Notice that contraction, she's. In this case, the S represents has. She has already gone home. She's already gone home. Or I could say, she was gone when I got home. So what's the difference between these two? Well, they're different verb tenses. Has gone is the present perfect verb tense. We form the present perfect with the subject, has or have, depending on the subject, and the third form of the verb, the past participle. So in our sentence, she's already gone home, our main verb in this sentence is the verb to go. And then we're taking that verb go and we're conjugating it in the present perfect. Because our subject is she, we need has as our auxiliary verb. And then I take my verb go and I put it in the third form, the past participle, and that's gone. Go, went, gone. She's already gone home. And this sentence is in the present perfect because it's a completed past action, but it has a present consequence. Now let's talk about was gone. This sentence structure is to be gone. So in this case, gone is being used as an adjective, and our main verb is be. Now because of that, we need to conjugate our main verb in the past, present, or future. And in this case, was is the past simple conjugation of the verb to be. And it's the past simple with the subject she. She was gone when I got home. In terms of meaning, when I say she was gone when I got home, all I'm saying is that she's no longer here now. So now you can see we have 2 different sentence structures. In the first one, we have the verb to go conjugated in the present perfect. In the second one, we have the sentence structure to be gone conjugated in the past simple. Now you might be wondering, when do we use to go and when do we use to be gone? Well, we use the verb to go when we're talking about movement. And we use the verb to be gone simply to mean no longer here. So we want to emphasize the absence of something or someone, not necessarily their movement. Another difference is that to go, talking about movement, this is used in an everyday context, is the most commonly used, the most natural. When we use to be gone, talking about the absence, this is used more in a narrative. So when perhaps you're telling a story, it could be a story to a friend, it could be in a book, it could be in a movie, in a newspaper article, for example, but you would expect to hear that sentence structure more in a narrative form. So now you know the difference between has gone and was gone. So it's your turn to practice. I want you to leave 2 examples, one with has gone and one with was gone, in the comments below. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about how to use the sentence structure having plus past participle. The past participle is your 3rd form of the verb. Now we use this structure when the action is complete. So whatever the action is, if the structure having plus past participle is used, you know that the person has done that action. Now, as for sentence structure, this is commonly used to start a sentence. So in that case, notice your sentence starts with the verb having. It doesn't start with a subject. It starts with having. And it's just implied that whoever is talking is the subject. So for example, one of the most common ways to use this is having said that. Having said that. So said, of course, is the 3rd form of the verb say. Having said that. Now, when somebody uses this expression, they're letting you know that they're going to reference something that they've previously said. In this expression, having said that, the that is the words that the person previously said. Now, normally they just said it. It was what they just said. It is possible that it could be something they said a while ago, but generally it's they just said it. So for example, you could be in a meeting and your boss is praising everyone, saying, awesome job, guys. We really did a great job this week. Our sales are up, our performance is up, and those are the words. Now, he wants to transition, and he could say, having said that, so he's referencing the words he just said. Remember, the words he just said were positive, okay? So you could say, having said that, we still have a lot of work to do. So he's giving you all this praise, but he wants you to keep in mind that there's still work to do. So he's balancing it out. Having said that, we still have a lot of work to do. So that's a very common way to use this expression. But you don't have to only use it with the verb say. You can use this with pretty much any verb. But remember, it's to show that the action is complete. Let's say my friend and I are talking about marathons, and my friend wants to run a marathon and is talking about training for this marathon. Now I could say, having run a marathon. Having run a marathon, I can give you some tips. So I'm letting my friend know that this action of running a marathon is complete for me. I've done it. I've run a marathon. Having run a marathon, I can give you some tips. So we commonly use this just to show the experiences that we've had that are complete for us in order to educate, or in order to inform, or maybe even in order to show sympathy or empathy for someone, to show that you understand their situation because you've experienced it as well. Now, I talked about how most commonly it's used to start a sentence. This isn't the only location. You can use it as the second part of a sentence, and it's going to follow a comma. So for example, I could say, New York City is known for its busy streets, and having lived there, I can confirm that this is true. So notice, it starts the next part of a sentence after a comma, and I'm just using and to show that connection between the two ideas. Of course, I can divide these into 2 separate sentences and say, New York City is known for its busy streets, period. Having lived there, I can confirm that is true. So the choice is yours. It doesn't really matter. It probably just depends on the sentence. But you will see this most commonly at the start of a sentence. And the important thing to remember is that the action is complete. So now you know how to use this advanced sentence structure. Of course, it's your turn to practice. So I want you to leave 3 different examples using 3 different verbs, so you also really get comfortable with the past participle, because you need the third form of the verb, which is the least common verb used. So I want you to get comfortable with that as well. So leave 3 different examples in the comments below. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the different ways you can use the verb appreciate.
So our first sentence structure that we can use is you can appreciate plus a noun. So this is the sentence structure. You would have obviously subject and then your verb appreciate conjugated with your subject, time reference, and subject as well. And then followed by the word appreciate, you have a noun. A noun is either a something or a someone. So you can say, I appreciate your time. So most likely that's what we need to do here, is just get rid of this word devoting and just put, I appreciate something. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your help. You can also just appreciate someone. I appreciate you. Or you can use it in the negative. My boss doesn't appreciate everything I do for this company. So this is probably the most common sentence structure with appreciate. Another sentence structure, when you want to talk about someone else, is what we needed here is a someone else. So with that, most likely you're going to use appreciate plus that and then a clause. Now, a clause, you need a subject, a verb, and a lot of the times an object, but at least you need a subject and a verb. So you can say, I appreciate that you spent your weekend helping me move. Now, this really means the same thing as I appreciated your help this weekend. Or we can say I appreciate now, even though you helped the weekend and it's already done, or it could be a future as well. I appreciate your help this weekend. So another sentence structure is we're just going to add the 2 words, the fact. When we do this, the meaning does not change between this one. I appreciate that and clause. When we add the fact, to me, it sounds more emphasized, making it a little bit more dramatic, stronger. I appreciate the fact that you spent your weekend helping me move. Again, just emphasizing it. Again, we can just simply say, I appreciate something, your help this weekend. Now, this is a sentence structure that most likely many students aren't using, or they're not using correctly. And they're not using it correctly because of what happens after the WH. So we have appreciate, then WH, which is who, what, when, why, where, or how. We consider how a WH. And then we still need a clause. So you have a subject, verb, and object. So we don't have a verb beside the WH. We have a subject, okay? So you could say, I appreciate who they are as people. So who is our WH, and then we have a clause. They are, subject, verb. Now, honestly, this really just means I appreciate them. It's just another way of saying it, really. And that's what I want you to understand from this, is that there are many different ways in English to say the same thing. And they're all correct. They're just simply different grammatical structures. And when you feel really confident with your English, it's because you're able to use different structures and understand how to use them correctly, and understand when the meaning changes and when the meaning doesn't change as well. You could say, I appreciate everyone who sent in a question or questions, who sent in a question. I appreciate what you're trying to say. I appreciate what you do for this company. I appreciate when you submit your questions. I appreciate where you're trying to take this company. Or I appreciate why you feel you deserve a promotion. Now, how? A lot of times when we use how, you're going to see much. I appreciate how much you do for this company. So this is a more advanced sentence structure, but I really encourage you to get comfortable with it. But make sure you pay attention that the WH plus a subject. A final sentence structure that you can use is appreciate, and then a pronoun, and then a gerund. This is also a more advanced structure. You can say, I appreciate you helping me today. So here, this is exactly the same as I appreciate your help today, or I appreciate the fact that you helped me today. I appreciate how much you helped me today. Ultimately, they're saying the same thing. They're just really different sentence structures.
Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the difference between the verbs wonder and wondering. What's the difference between I wonder, I'm wondering, and I was wondering? Let's look at all three in an example sentence. I wonder what time the store opens. I'm wondering what time the store opens. I was wondering what time the store opens. What's the difference between all three? Ultimately, there's a very subtle difference, and you can use any one of the three and it will be grammatically correct, it will sound natural, and there'll be a very minor difference in meaning. The difference is quite insignificant, so don't overthink this. If the explanation is too complicated for you, just know that anyone will do the trick. Now let's look at the difference between them a little bit more. Well, you've probably noticed that the verb tense is different. Now, that's really it. The verb tense is different, but ultimately the meaning is the same. So of course, I wonder what time the store opens. What verb tense is this? The present simple. We use the verb wonder in the present simple mainly when it's an in general situation. So the fact that we're wondering isn't really limited to this moment in time. It's just taking place in general. And we also use I wonder more when we're thinking out loud. I wonder what I should have for lunch today. But as we're thinking out loud, we don't always want an answer or expect an answer. So let's imagine that you're my coworker and you're standing right beside me. We're in the kitchen at work and I say out loud, I wonder what I should have for lunch today. I don't necessarily want you to reply. I'm just thinking out loud. But if you, as my coworker, if you did reply and you suggested something I should have for lunch, I wouldn't be offended by it. I would gladly accept it. But the purpose of saying it isn't to get a reply. It's more just thinking out loud. I'm wondering is, of course, in the present continuous. The present continuous is used for actions taking place right now. So in this case, when I use the present continuous, I'm putting emphasis on the fact that I'm wondering right now. This is taking place right now. We generally use I'm wondering in the present continuous to ask an indirect question. For example, I might say, I'm wondering if you could help me move tonight. I'm wondering if you could help me move tonight. Now, it's an indirect question because I'm not saying directly, can you help me move tonight, which would be a direct question. It's an indirect question. But in this case, I do expect you to reply back and give me an answer. I was wondering is the past continuous. In this case, we're putting emphasis on the fact that the action, I was wondering, the action of wondering took place in the past. But here's what you need to know. Even though the action of wondering happened in the past, I can still ask you an indirect question now. I was wondering if you can help me move tonight. So in this case, there really is no difference in meaning between the present continuous and the past continuous. I can still use it to ask an indirect question now. It's just whether I was contemplating, wondering that now or in the past. So that's the very subtle difference in meaning, but remember what I said at the beginning, that ultimately all three can be used to make a statement in the present, even though they use completely different verb tenses. So the grammar is different, and there is a subtle difference in meaning. However, ultimately all three are acceptable forms. So now it's your turn to practice. I want you to leave 3 different examples using the present simple, present continuous, and past continuous of the verb wonder. So leave those in the comments below. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about how to use the advanced sentence structure, not only X, but also Y. We use the expression not only X, but also Y to identify 2 characteristics, traits, or points. This is a formal expression. You can use it in a business presentation or in a formal report or an academic essay. It will help you sound very advanced. Now, we have X and Y. The thing to keep in mind is that X and Y are both going to be positive points or they're both going to be negative points. But we're not making a contrast with X and Y, so they have to match. For example, I could say, Paul's not only intelligent, but also funny. So here our X and Y is intelligent and funny. Now notice in the second part of our sentence, but also funny, notice how I didn't repeat the subject and verb. I didn't repeat, but he is also funny. That subject and verb is going to apply for both parts of the sentence. So if you say it in part 1, you don't have to repeat it in part 2 if it's the exact same subject and verb. Now we use this structure, not only X, but also Y, to add emphasis to our 2 points. Because let's compare this to just a very simple statement, and I could say, Paul's intelligent and funny. Paul's intelligent and funny. Both of these expressions have the exact same meaning. I would say just using not only, but also, I'm emphasizing those 2 traits and characteristics. Plus, it sounds a lot more advanced. Now, in this example, both of our traits are positive. Intelligent is positive and funny is positive. But I could also use an example where both the traits are negative. For example, I could say, Petra's not only lazy, but also irresponsible. So notice, both my traits, my X and Y, they match. They're both negative. Let's look at another example. I improved not only my speaking, but also my writing. Now notice here, I improved. My verb is in the past. If this was an action in progress, I could say I'm improving. I'm improving not only, but also. Now notice in the second part, I still don't repeat the subject and the verb because it's the same for the first part and the second part, so it's not necessary. Now let's look at one more example where I'm going to change the structure just a little bit. I could say, not only does she speak German, she also speaks Dutch. Now, notice I'm beginning with not only. In this specific case, when I begin with not only, I have to include do as an auxiliary verb. And of course, do is going to be conjugated in the present simple or the past simple or whatever time reference you have. So here, not only does she speak German, but of course, in a normal sentence, I would simply say she speaks German. I wouldn't use the auxiliary verb do. I'm using it in this case only because I'm starting with not only. You can think of this just as a grammar rule that you need to apply to this specific structure when you begin with not only. Not only does she speak German, she also speaks Dutch. Now notice in the second part, I'm not repeating the auxiliary verb does. It's not necessary. This is a little more of an advanced structure. If it's too advanced for you, then you don't need it because you can simply say she speaks not only German, but also Dutch. The meaning is exactly the same. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to take it a little more advanced as well. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the difference between over and during. So what's the difference between saying, we went to the beach over the weekend? We went to the beach during the weekend. Now in this context, over and during have the exact same meaning. However, we only use them in the same way in very specific expressions. This isn't something we do all the time. You can use over or during, and there's no difference when you're talking about the weekend, holidays, seasons, vacation, or meals. For example, you could say, let's discuss this over lunch. Let's discuss this during lunch. Lunch is a meal. And remember, I said we can use over or during for meals. Now, generally, native speakers will use over or during without any difference, but there is a subtle difference in meaning. And that's when we use over, it sounds like it's the entire time. from start to finish. So if I say, let's talk about this over lunch, to me, it sounds like the entire lunch from start to finish will be discussing the project. So let's discuss the project over lunch. That's the only thing we're doing. But if I say, let's discuss the project during lunch, to me that sounds like at one specific point during lunch. It could be at the beginning of lunch, it could be at the middle of lunch, it could be at the end of lunch. But at one specific point, we'll discuss the project. But we'll do other things as well. So that's the difference, although it's subtle, and most native speakers will just use one or the other without thinking about that difference. Now just remember that we only use over and during interchangeably in that very specific context of weekends, holidays, vacation, meal, and seasons. Outside of those specific categories, they have different meanings and they're not interchangeable. So for example, I have to say, nobody talked during the presentation. I can't say nobody talked over the presentation. That doesn't sound right because the presentation is not one of the categories I gave you. Or for example, the presentation went for over 3 hours. Now in this case, over means more than. It went for more than 3 hours. It went for over 3 hours. So I can't change it to during, and I can't say the presentation went for during 3 hours. That doesn't work. So most of the time they don't have the same meaning. Again, just remember those categories: the weekend, holidays, vacation, seasons, and meals. You can use either one. I cleaned the garage over the weekend. I cleaned the garage during the weekend. So now it's your turn to practice. I want you to leave 2 examples, both using over and during. So make sure you choose one of those categories and leave 2 examples in the comments below. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about the difference between the past simple and the present perfect. And specifically, we're looking at the 2 sentences, I already ate and I've already eaten. Now, of course, you need to notice the structure. So you need to know how to form the past simple and the present perfect. So just keep that in mind. And let's talk about the meaning of these 2. So we use the past simple with a completed past action, right? This action is complete. I already ate. That is a finished, completed action in the past. Now, let's talk about the present perfect. Here's what you need to keep in mind. The present perfect has many different uses depending on the context. In this lesson, we're specifically talking about comparing these 2 sentences. So in this specific context, the present perfect can be used for a past action with a present consequence, okay? There are other ways we use the present perfect. We're not going to discuss those. We're specifically talking about this one meaning, a past action with a present consequence. I've already eaten. So as you can see just from their definitions that they can both be used with a completed past action. The difference is the present perfect, present. There's a connection to the present, okay? So keep that as your memory aid. Present perfect, present, connection to the present. With the past simple, that connection to the present isn't there. One other thing you need to keep in mind is that a native English speaker is not a grammar expert. a native English speaker is going to use these two sentences in this specific context. They're going to use these two sentences interchangeably, and there's not going to be a difference in meaning. So when a native speaker says, I already ate, or I've already eaten, there's no difference at all. If you ask them, why did you say this one and not this one? They're not going to know because they don't study grammar, okay? And they're both acceptable, so just keep that in mind. A native speaker is going to use them interchangeably with no difference in meaning. But let's talk about that subtle difference in meaning when we say that the present perfect can be used with a past action that has a present consequence. What does that mean, a present consequence? So let's just think about that. I already ate. In the past simple, just remember, completed, past action. It's done, it's over. I already ate. Now, when I say I've already eaten, there's some sort of connection to the present. So you can always think of it in your head as I've already eaten, so now, okay? I've already eaten, so now, because connection to the present, I've already eaten, so now I'm not hungry. So now, I don't want a piece of cake. So now, I don't want to go to that restaurant with you, okay? I've already eaten. But keep in mind that so now, we don't verbalize it. We don't say it out loud. It's just implied in the context, okay? So let's take a look at a few more examples. I could say, I talked to my boss. Just a completed past action. Or I could say, I've talked to my boss. So what's the connection to the present? Maybe I've talked to my boss, so now I'm going to leave. Maybe that's just the connection to the present. It could be anything. Again, we don't verbalize that. It's just implied. How about this one? I checked the mail. Just completed past action. I checked the mail. Or I've checked the mail in the present perfect. I've checked the mail. What's the connection to the present? I've checked the mail, so you don't have to. That could be the connection to the present. One more example. I booked the hotel. Completed past action. Or I could say, I've booked the hotel in the present perfect. I've booked the hotel, so now we're going on vacation. Maybe that's the connection to the present. So now I'm excited. Remember, we don't specifically say it, it's just implied. And also, in all of these examples, in this specific context, a native English speaker is going to use them interchangeably without a difference in meaning. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Now let's talk about how you can correctly use three very common verbs: recommend, suggest, and advise. So let's say you're at a restaurant, you're looking through the menu, and then you ask your server, what would you recommend me? Or you're discussing a problem with your boss and you ask, what would you suggest me? What do you think about these sentences? Are these sentences grammatically correct or incorrect? What do you think? Well, these sentences are wrong. You can't say, what would you recommend me, suggest me, yet I hear it every single day. In fact, I hear this so much from students that it's starting to sound normal just because I hear it every single day, and I have to remember that's not correct. And the reason why this is incorrect is because the sentence structure is incorrect. Following the verb recommend, suggest, we do not want an object pronoun. Me is an object pronoun. The good news is there's a very easy way to fix this. Just don't say me. If you're at a restaurant, say, what would you recommend? If you're talking to your boss, say, what do you suggest? That's all you need to do, because grammatically, from a sentence structure, we don't want the object pronoun. Now let's take a look at this example I saw on Youglish. The example is, I recommend you find 150 books. Now this is where students get confused because they see you, I recommend you. So why can't I say, what would you recommend me? Because this you is not an object pronoun. It's tricky because you is both the subject pronoun, I, you, he, she, it, we, they, and you is also the object pronoun, me, you, him, her. But in this sentence, the you is a subject pronoun. Now you'll notice here, we have our verb recommend, and then following the verb recommend, we have a clause. A clause is a subject, a verb, and an object. I recommend you is the subject. Find is the verb. 150 books is the object. Now, in written English, you can use that to connect recommend and the clause. I recommend that. I suggest that. It's optional, and in written English, it's most commonly included, but in spoken English, it's most commonly left out. So based on what I just said, what do you think about this sentence? The doctor suggested me to lose weight. Is this sentence correct or incorrect? What do you think? The doctor suggested me to lose weight. It's wrong. You can't say this because me is an object pronoun and we do have a verb, but the verb isn't even conjugated with anything. It's just in the infinitive form. So remember, we need recommend, suggest, plus a clause. A clause is a subject, a verb, and an object. So how can we fix this sentence? We can say, the doctor recommended that I lose weight. I is our subject. Lose is our verb. Notice the verb is conjugated with the subject, and our object is weight. Remember, that is optional. Most likely, I'll keep it in with written English and I'll leave it out with spoken English. The doctor recommended I lose weight. Another quiz for you. What do you think about this sentence? Would you recommend me for the promotion? Would you recommend me for the promotion? What do you think? Is this good or bad? This is good. Don't be confused. I'm going to make this very clear for you. Would you recommend me for the promotion? In this sentence, I am not receiving the recommendation. I am the recommendation because you can recommend something. For example, I recommend the duck. If you're at a restaurant and you're looking for different items, there's chicken, fish, and duck. I recommend the duck. That's a something. So in this case, I am the recommendation. I'm the recommendation for the promotion. Think of it like this. Your boss asks you, who should we recommend for the promotion? Who should we recommend? We should recommend Jennifer. Of course, why wouldn't you? We should recommend Jennifer. I am the recommendation. So in my question, remember, I asked my colleague, would you recommend me for the promotion? This is not the same as saying, what would you recommend me? Because that is incorrect. In that case, I'm receiving the recommendation. I am not the recommendation. I'm receiving it. And then you don't want an object pronoun and you simply say, what would you recommend? I recommend the duck. Who would you recommend? I recommend Jennifer. There's another sentence structure you need to know, and that's recommend, suggest, plus gerund. Gerund is your verb in ing. For example, I recommend drinking 8 glasses of water a day. I recommend ordering the duck. Now let's talk about advise. You can say he advised signing the contract. So what do you notice here? What's the sentence structure? What do we have right here? Well, of course, we have advise plus gerund. So this is the same thing we can do with recommend or suggest. And you can also say, he advised that I sign the contract. So what do you notice about this sentence structure? Well, it's advise plus that, which is optional. And then we have our clause, subject, verb, and then our object. So this is also the exact same sentence structure you can use with recommend or suggest. Now, what about this sentence? He advised me to sign the contract. Advised me. He advised me. What do you think? Is this correct or incorrect? Well, this is correct. So with this specific verb, advise, you can have a pronoun. You can advise someone. But notice what comes next. We have our infinitive, to plus base verb. He advised me. He advised him, he advised her, he advised you to sign, to go, to eat, to drink, any infinitive, and then our object, the contract. So advise is more flexible. You can use it with the gerund, the clause, and you can even say advise me. So now let's talk about explain, because I hear this every single day. Teacher, can you explain me how to use the present perfect? What do you think about that? Can you explain me? Is that correct or incorrect? Well, you should know this by now. It's wrong. You don't explain someone. You explain to someone. This is why I saved explain for the end, but I really wanted you to learn it because it's the same thing. We don't want an object pronoun. Explain me? No. Explain to me. That's all you need to do. You need to add that preposition to because you explain to someone. Now, most commonly, we use the structure explain something to someone. Can you explain the present perfect to me? Now, if it's obvious that you're the one receiving the explanation, you don't even have to say it. You don't need to say to me, to him, to us, to them. If it's obvious, you can just say, can you explain the present perfect? That's fine. But you don't want to say, can you explain me? So please take the time to study and learn what I taught you in this video because you will not sound fluent. You will not sound natural. You will not pass your IELTS or your language exam if you say, recommend me, explain me. That's a beginner mistake. But I hear all my students, advanced students from every background use that sentence structure. So take the time, watch this video multiple times to really understand the sentence structure and then leave some examples in the comments below because you really need to practice it the correct way and get lots of repetitions with the correct form. Are you ready for your quiz? Here are your questions. Hit pause, take as much time as you need, and when you're ready, hit play to see the answers. Amazing job with this lesson. Think of all the grammar mistakes that you corrected today. What was your favorite section? Share in the comments below. And how did you do with those quizzes? Share your scores in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and of course, subscribe. And before you go, make sure you head on over to my website, JForrestEnglish.com, and download your free speaking guide. In this guide, I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. And until next time, happy studying.